Cary Grant died last night in Davenport, Iowa, of a stroke. One film critic said he had the longest romantic reign in the short history of movies. Sandy Kenyon has this look at the film legend's career.
Cary Grant, the man who defined Hollywood elegance. A silver screen icon, admired by millions, envied by men, desired by women. He was the embodiment of charm, wit, and effortless sophistication. But behind the polished smile and tailored suits, there was a secret, a truth so unsettling that it remained hidden for years. His only daughter, Jennifer Grant, has finally spoken out, and what she reveals is not the fairy tale story the world believed. Was Cary Grant truly the devoted father he appeared to be? Or was his love so suffocating, so meticulously controlled, that it became something else entirely? Some now ask, did Hollywood's most beloved leading man secretly resent his daughter? To understand this fractured bond, we must go back to where it all started, Cary Grant's difficult childhood. Archie Leach entered the world in a small, struggling household in Bristol, England. From the very beginning, life was a fight for survival. His father, Elias, worked tirelessly, but there was never enough money to keep the family secure. His mother, Elsie, was a fragile woman, carrying dreams of a better life that never seemed within reach. Their home was filled with tension, and young Archie could feel it in every corner. Then, one day, everything changed. Archie returned home from school, expecting to see his mother, but she was gone. His father, cold and dismissive, simply told him she had left for a long trip. Days turned to months, then years, but she never came back. What he didn't know was the truth. His father had sent her to an institution without warning, without explanation. She was locked away for over 20 years, while Archie was left behind to wonder why she had abandoned him. The absence gnawed at him, creating a wound that would never fully heal. Without his mother, Archie was left in the care of a father who had no interest in raising a child. Elias was distant, barely acknowledging his son's existence. He provided shelter, but little else. There were no words of comfort, no moments of warmth. Archie grew up in an environment where emotions were buried, and love was something to be earned, not given freely. But Archie was clever. He learned early on that if he couldn't get attention through affection, he could earn it through performance. He became the class clown, the boy who made people laugh, the one who could turn any situation into a joke. If he could keep people entertained, maybe they wouldn't leave him like his mother had. He practiced impressions, exaggerated his movements, and developed an uncanny ability to read the emotions of those around him. He understood what people wanted to see, and he gave it to them. Yet, deep inside, there was an unshakable fear of being unwanted. He carried it like a weight, a constant reminder that nothing in life was secure. If his mother could disappear without a word, who else might abandon him? The experience shaped him in ways he couldn't understand at the time. It made him crave control over his environment, over his image, over the people in his life. As he grew older, he realized that his small, unstable world in Bristol could never give him the security he so desperately needed. He had to leave. His escape from hardship led him to the stage, but Hollywood would soon reshape his identity. Archie Leach was determined to leave behind the pain of his past. When he set foot in America, he wasn't just chasing opportunity, he was chasing reinvention. The name Archie didn't belong in the world he wanted to conquer. It carried the weight of poverty, loss, and rejection. He needed something new, something powerful, something that sounded like it had always belonged among the Hollywood elite. With a studio contract in hand, he became Cary Grant. But creating a name wasn't enough. He had to become the character. He studied the wealthy, mimicking their accents, their mannerisms, and their effortless charm. He practiced walking with confidence, speaking with precision, and crafting an image that left no room for flaws. His transformation was so complete that even those closest to him rarely saw the boy from Bristol anymore. Cary Grant wasn't a role, it became his existence. Despite the success, there was an underlying conflict. No matter how carefully he shaped his persona, there were moments when the insecurity crept through. The fear of rejection, the fear of being seen as ordinary, the fear that underneath it all, he was still Archie Leach, the boy who had once been abandoned. He poured himself into his career, delivering performances that defined an era. He mastered the art of wit, romance, and sophistication, but he was always performing, even off. His personal life became another script to control. He married multiple times, each relationship unraveling under the weight of his need for perfection. No woman seemed to fit the ideal he had built in his mind. When problems arose, he pulled away, unwilling to confront the vulnerability that relationships demanded. Those closest to him often described him as both charming and distant, warm yet unreachable. And then there were the whispers. The close friendship with fellow actor Randolph Scott fueled speculation that Grant's carefully curated persona was hiding something deeper. Their years of living together only added to the mystery. Publicity photos of the two lounging at home, cooking, laughing, images meant to sell their bachelor lifestyle, became something else entirely in later years. The rumors followed him throughout his career, despite his repeated denials. In a world that demanded conformity, Grant did everything he could to keep the narrative in his control. No matter how successful he became, the need for approval, acceptance, for absolute control over his life never faded. He had spent decades crafting the perfect man, but perfection was a lonely place. Then, everything changed. When Cary Grant finally found love again, he made a life-changing decision to become a father. In 1966, at the height of his career, Cary Grant did the unthinkable. He walked away from Hollywood. While studios begged him to stay, offering roles that would have made him millions, he turned them all down. For a man who had spent his entire life chasing perfection, it seemed like he had finally found something more important: fatherhood. He wasn't just leaving acting behind, he was rewriting his history. Jennifer Grant was born when he was 62, long past the age when most men start families. To the outside world, it was a heartwarming story. A screen legend stepping away from the glitz and glamour to embrace the simple joys of raising a child. He had spent years perfecting the image of the sophisticated leading man, but now he had a new role, the doting father. But was it really about love, or was it something else entirely? For Cary Grant, fatherhood wasn't just about raising a child. It was about fixing something, fixing himself. He had been denied a real childhood, and now he saw a chance to create the perfect one for Jennifer. He wasn't going to make the same mistakes his parents had made. He was going to give her everything he never had: stability, structure, security. He would protect her from every disappointment, every hardship, but in doing so, was he giving her love, or was he suffocating her under his impossible standards? His parenting style quickly took shape. Cary Grant, the man who had spent decades controlling every detail of his image, now controlled every detail of his daughter's life. He meticulously documented her childhood, filming her every move, recording her every word. He kept journals detailing her meals, her routines, and even her emotions. To the outside world, it seemed like devotion, but to Jennifer, it often felt like being under a microscope. There were strict rules. Every moment was planned, and every decision was carefully considered. He dictated what she wore, who she spent time with, what she could and couldn't do. Even her emotions weren't entirely her own. If she was sad, he wanted to know why. If she was happy, he needed to understand it. She wasn't just his daughter, she was his project, a reflection of his attempt to rewrite the past. For Grant, it was all done out of love. But love, when paired with control, can become something else entirely. He had spent his entire life ensuring that the world saw him exactly as he wanted to be seen. Now he was doing the same thing with Jennifer. But unlike a film role, a child isn't something you can script, edit, and perfect. At what point does devotion turn into obsession? At what point does protection become confinement? But what seemed like devotion soon turned into something much more suffocating. Jennifer Grant had spent her entire life being watched, not just by the public, not just by reporters fascinated by the only daughter of a Hollywood icon, but by her father himself. Every milestone, every moment, every word she spoke was recorded, archived, and preserved. To the world, it seemed like an act of love, but to Jennifer, it often felt like something else. In her memoir, Good Stuff, she revealed the reality behind the perfect picture. Cary Grant wasn't just a father, he was a director, a producer, and a perfectionist who wanted to shape her life the way he had shaped his career. He filmed her first steps, recorded her laughter, and took notes on her moods. He saved every piece of her childhood, from baby teeth to school projects, placing them in a climate-controlled vault as if they were fragile props from a classic film. It was overwhelming. She wasn't just his daughter, she was his creation. She grew up knowing that every action, every word was being examined. She adored her father, but she also felt the pressure of his expectations. He wanted her to be kind but strong, poised but playful, independent yet constantly by his side. He had built himself into an image of perfection, and now, knowingly or not, he expected the name Cary Grant had built, a name that wasn't even real. At times, she struggled to separate who she was from who he wanted her to be. She was praised when she followed the path he envisioned and met with silence when she didn't. His love wasn't absent, but it was conditional, tied to the idea that she would become the person he had dreamed of, not necessarily the person she wanted to be. The burden of being Cary Grant's daughter was heavier than anyone could imagine. She wasn't allowed to fail, to rebel, to make mistakes without it being scrutinized. If she was anything less than perfect, it reflected on him, and the weight of that expectation created cracks in their relationship that only deepened as she grew older. She loved him, there was never any doubt about that. But love, when mixed with pressure, can feel more like obligation than freedom. As Jennifer grew older, the tension only increased. Jennifer Grant grew up under the watchful eye of a man who had spent his life perfecting the art of control. He had retired from the silver screen to raise her, but as she entered her teenage years, it became clear that fatherhood was not something he could direct like a film. No amount of planning could prevent what came next, the moment she started wanting a life of her own. For Cary Grant, the structure was everything. He had lived through chaos, rejection, and abandonment, and he was determined to give Jennifer the stability he never had. But stability soon turned into restriction. The rules were unspoken but absolute. Her behavior, her appearance, and even her emotions had to align with his expectations. He had designed a perfect childhood for her, but as she grew older, she started to question whether she had ever truly been free to live it. Like any teenager, Jennifer began to push back. She wanted more independence and more space to make her own decisions. But to Grant, this was more than just typical rebellion. It was a disruption of the world he had carefully built. He had stepped away from his career to devote himself entirely to being a father, so why wasn't she perfectly happy? When she made choices he didn't approve of, he withdrew. Silence became his weapon. Instead of yelling or arguing, he simply pulled away, a form of punishment that left her feeling unseen, unheard, and deeply uncertain. The same man who had once filmed her every moment, who had meticulously recorded every detail of her childhood, suddenly became distant when she stopped fitting into the role he had imagined for her. The irony was impossible to ignore. He had walked away from Hollywood to ensure she had a perfect life, yet he couldn't handle her becoming her person. For years, Jennifer had been the center of his world, but now, as she developed her own identity, she was beginning to feel like she was losing him. There were moments of warmth, times when the father she adored would reappear, but those moments were always fleeting, always dependent on whether she was playing the part he wanted her to. It was an unspoken truth that haunted their relationship. Was his love truly unconditional, or was it tied to his vision of the perfect daughter? Jennifer spent years wrestling with that question. She never doubted that her father cared about her, but love, when built on expectations, can feel more like a contract than a gift. But the real shock came in Cary Grant's final years. Cary Grant had spent his entire life in control. He controlled his image, his career, and for years, his daughter's world. But as he aged, the grip he once held so tightly began to loosen. The man who had spent decades shaping every aspect of his life was now forced to confront something he could not direct: time. Jennifer was no longer the little girl he had meticulously documented. She had grown into her person, independent and free-thinking, with ideas and desires that did not always align with his. And for the first time, Cary Grant had to face a reality he had long avoided. He could not control the future. He could not stop Jennifer from growing up, from making her own choices, from stepping outside the boundaries he had set for her. As he moved further into his later years, there were moments of reflection. Did he regret the way he had raised her? He had given up Hollywood, fortune, and fame to be a father. But had he been the kind of father she needed? Jennifer had always loved him, but the tension between them never fully disappeared. Even as he softened with age, the wounds of the past remained. The unspoken expectations, the silent judgments, the moments when love felt conditional. These things do not simply vanish, and though he may have tried to mend their bond, some cracks run too deep to be fully repaired. In his final years, Grant stepped back into the public eye, not as an actor, but as a storyteller. He traveled the country, hosting live conversations where he reflected on his life and career. Audiences adored him, hanging on his every word. Yet the one person he perhaps needed to speak to most was the one who had spent her life trying to understand him. Then, in November of 1986, everything ended suddenly. While preparing for one of his stage appearances in Iowa, Grant suffered a massive stroke. Despite medical intervention, there was nothing that could be done. At 11:22 p.m., Hollywood's most charming man was gone. Jennifer was just 20 years old when she lost her father, and in that moment, whatever had been left unsaid between them would remain that way forever. There was no final conversation, no chance to ask the questions that had lingered in her mind for years. Did he ever regret the way he had raised her? Did he understand how much pressure he had placed on her shoulders? Did he know that, despite everything, she had never stopped loving him? The answers died with him. Cary Grant left behind an estate worth millions, but the true inheritance he gave Jennifer wasn't wealth, it was questions without answers. Their relationship had been complicated, built on love, control, and unspoken expectations. And now, with him gone, she was left to make sense of it on her own. Today, Jennifer Grant continues to speak about her father, but her words remain bittersweet. Cary Grant remains one of Hollywood's most enduring legends. His name is synonymous with charm, elegance, and effortless sophistication. Decades after his passing, his films continue to captivate audiences, his performances studied, and his influence undeniable. To the world, he was the ultimate leading man, a figure of perfection, untouchable and timeless. But behind the scenes, the reality was far more complex. His personal life was a puzzle. A carefully constructed image masking deep insecurities. He spent years shaping the man the world would adore, yet in doing so he became trapped by his expectations. And when he became a father, that need for control didn't disappear, it simply found a new subject. Jennifer wasn't just his daughter, she was the embodiment of his second chance, the unfinished chapter of his childhood. But in trying to create the perfect life for her, did he ever stop to consider what she truly wanted? Jennifer Grant has never painted her father as a villain. She has spoken of his kindness, his humor, his deep devotion, but she has also acknowledged the weight of his expectations, the pressure of being Cary Grant's daughter. She has described a man who loved deeply, but struggled to express it in ways that felt unconditional. A father who was present, yet sometimes distant. A man who adored his child, but unknowingly placed upon her a burden she never asked to carry. In the end, Cary Grant's most complex role wasn't in a film, it was in the life of his daughter. He gave her everything, yet in some ways it was never enough. He wanted to protect her from the hardships he had endured, yet in doing so he created a different kind of struggle, one built not on poverty or neglect, but on expectations and silent pressure. Was he a devoted father, or a man trying to control the uncontrollable? Was his love pure, or was it always shadowed by his past? These are the questions that linger, the ones Jennifer herself has spent a lifetime answering. Years later, the world still wonders, was Cary Grant's love for his daughter genuine, or was it overshadowed by the ghosts of his past? Thanks for watching. Forget to like and subscribe for more exciting videos about your favorite celebrity stars.